All right, so we're diving deep today into The Painted Veil, and I've got to say, I'm pretty excited about this one. We've got all your sources right here, ready to go. And yeah, we're going to do more than just like skim the surface, right? We're going for themes, character arcs, the stuff that makes this novel really tick. So, what jumped out at you from all this?
It's interesting how Maugham structured the novel, 5 parts, each one mapping onto Kitty Fane's journey. Like he's taking us through her self-discovery step by step. Your outline focuses on the first 4 parts, which is great because those really lay the groundwork for everything.
Okay, yeah. So, part one, illusions and ultimatums.
Mhm.
We meet Kitty, right? All these fancy parties, social status, but I don't know, there's this feeling of emptiness. She's married to Walter, but it's not exactly a love fest. And then, boom, Charles Townsend enters the scene, bringing all this passion. Do you think Marham's like commenting on the societal pressures on Kitty, like how those shaped her worldview?
Oh, absolutely. He's definitely critiquing the expectations on women back then, like appearances, social standing, all that, over genuine connection. Kitty's affair with Charles, it's a rebellion, sure, but it also shows us the illusion she's built around herself.
Yeah, and then it all blows up, right? Walter finds out about the affair and that ultimatum. Marry Charles or go with him to this cholera-ridden village. Whoa, intense. I mean, my first thought was Walter's being harsh. But is there another way to see it? Is it his attempt to save the marriage or just straight up manipulation?
It's a great question, and it's tricky, right? Easy to see Walter's the bad guy, but Monum, he gives us more nuance than that. Walter's hurt, his pride's wounded, and that ultimatum, it's anger, it's a power move, but it also shows us how isolated they are in their marriage. All these unspoken expectations, resentment, they're both trapped.
Part two, from Hong Kong to heartbreak. That journey to Fu, brutal. Kitty goes from glitz and glamour to this remote village.
Yeah, and the setting, it almost becomes a character itself. The cholera epidemic, it's not just background noise. It reflects the chaos inside Kitty. She's facing the consequences of her choices head on.
And then Waddington shows up, the deputy commissioner. He talks about Walter, how dedicated, intelligent he is. It's like suddenly Kitty's image of her husband cracks a little.
Oh, totally. That's a key moment.
Mhm.
Waddington makes her question everything. Could she be wrong about Walter? Remember, she's been seeing him through her own unhappiness.
Yeah, and then you've got the French nuns, caring for the sick, dying. They represent such different values, right? Compassion, selflessness, not social status. That's got to be jarring for Kitty.
Yeah, for sure. These women, they embody a life of purpose, a stark contrast to what Kitty's been chasing. It's a turning point. She's seeing beyond her own needs.
Okay, part three, growth through service and a surprise. Kitty starts working at the convent. Surrounded by death, suffering, it's got to force her to face her own selfishness.
Absolutely. This is where the real transformation kicks in. She's not just watching anymore. She's involved. It's breaking down her old beliefs.
And her view of Walter keeps shifting too. She sees his bravery, how selfless he is in this epidemic. You mentioned earlier maybe Walter's not the villain. Do you think Kitty's starting to see that too?
It's definitely possible. Her first judgment of him,
Yeah.
clouded by her own unhappiness. Now, she's seeing him differently.
And then there's Waddington's Chinese mistress, this woman. She's got this quiet wisdom, contentment, like societal pressures don't even touch her. So different from Kitty's world. It feels like Mom's showing us other ways to be a woman, challenging those Victorian ideals.
Exactly. She represents a life on her own terms, quietly rebelling against all those expectations.
And then, bam, the curveball Kitty finds out she's pregnant. Talk about a complication. We don't know who the father is. How does this change things for Kitty?
It makes her face the consequences of her actions, like on a whole new level. And it adds urgency to her self-discovery. Now it's not just about her, it's about another life.
All right, part four, death, departure, and a final confrontation. The stakes get higher. Walter gets sick, cholera. It feels so tragic, especially with how they were starting to connect.
It is tragic, no doubt, but Walter's death, it's symbolic too. His sacrifice. It highlights the difference between him and Charles. Charles, who chose to save himself.
And his last words, quoting Oliver Goldsmith, man, the heart that is soonest awake to the flowers is always the first to be touched by the frost. Heartbreaking. And we're left wondering, did he ever forgive Kitty?
Yeah, that ambiguity is what makes it so powerful. We see Kitty wrestling with that. Unspoken forgiveness. It adds another layer to her grief.
After Walter dies, Kitty decides to leave Fu. It feels like she's breaking from her past, like a physical representation of what's going on inside her.
Definitely, she's choosing to leave behind the life she knew, the life built on illusions that fell apart. She's ready for something new.
And then that final encounter with Charles in Hong Kong, she rejects him completely. Such a contrast to how desperate she was earlier.
Right. It shows how much she's transformed. She doesn't need his validation anymore. She's taking control.
Wow, we've covered so much. Kitty goes through a lot in these first four parts. She's a completely different person. It makes you think about how powerful experience can be, especially when it forces you to face reality.
Absolutely. It's often when those illusions shatter that real growth starts. And Kitty's journey is a perfect example of that.
It's like she had to be stripped bare, emotionally and physically, in Maytan Fu to really start seeing clearly. So, where do things go from here? We haven't even talked about her return to England in part 5.
Right. Part 5 brings us full circle in a way. Kitty goes back to England, but she's not the same woman who left. She reconnects with her father, who's now a judge in the Bahamas, and she sees him with new eyes. It makes you wonder, with how her view of Walter changed, if she's seeing those same qualities in her father now, that quiet strength, integrity.
That's such a good point. Before, it was all about her mother's social ambitions. Think she's reevaluating her whole family now.
I think so, yeah. It's like she's finally seeing past the surface. But remember, she's still carrying that secret, the uncertainty about her child's father. It adds this tension to her homecoming. She's got this newfound clarity, but she's still dealing with her past.
That internal conflict, it's got to be weighing on her. What kind of future does she see for herself and her child? Does she fall back into those old societal expectations?
This is where it gets really interesting. Kitty makes a choice to break free from all that. Those societal constraints that trapped her before. She sees what happened with her mother, that focus on social status, advantageous marriages, and she says, nope, not doing that.
Like she's finally taking charge, rejecting the life that was planned out for her, choosing her own path as a woman and a mother.
Exactly. And that choice of the Bahamas, it speaks volumes. It's a deliberate move away from London society. She wants a fresh start, a place to raise her child with the values she's embraced. Independence, strength.
It's powerful, this idea of self-determination, even after all the loss, the heartbreak. She's building a new future for herself and the next generation. What stands out to you about this ending?
I think there's this quiet sense of redemption. Even though Walter's gone and they never fully reconciled, Kitty's growth, her transformation, it becomes a testament to him. She's embracing the values he embodied. Compassion, integrity, service. It's bittersweet, for sure. She finds peace, but there's that knowledge of what could have been if she'd understood Walter sooner.
Yeah, that bittersweetness. It really hits home. It reminds us that growth comes at a cost. But it's never too late to change, to learn, and create a new future. It makes me think about what Mom is trying to say. Why take us on this journey with Kitty?
The Painted Veil. It's a story that goes beyond its time. It taps into those universal human truths. We've all been blinded by illusions, made choices we regret, struggled with who we are. Kitty's journey, it's not just about her. It's about our own capacity for growth, change, self-discovery.
It's a reminder that even when we mess up, when we lose things, there's still potential for something good to come out of it. It's a story about hope, resilience, the human spirit.
And that's Mama's brilliance. He doesn't give us easy answers, neat endings. He gives us questions, space to think about our own experiences and how they shape us.
Speaking of questions, there's one that's been on my mind this whole time. We see Kitty transform, but do you think she ever really forgives herself? Especially knowing Walter never got to forgive her.
Oh, that's a great question, and it's open to interpretation. We see her remorse, her trying to make things right. But there's this feeling that guilt still hangs on. It makes you think about how that affects her as a mother. Does she try too hard to protect her child from making the same mistakes? Or does she embrace the messiness of life, teaching her child to learn and grow from those stumbles?
Those are profound questions for sure. Like Mama's inviting us to continue the story, explore those unanswered questions, see how they play out in our own lives.
Exactly. That's the power of great literature. It stays with you, makes you think differently, feel more deeply, maybe even live more intentionally.
Well said. Huge thank you for joining me on this deep dive into The Painted Veil. It's been a pleasure unraveling this book with you.
The pleasure was mine.
And to you listening, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity. If you haven't already, pick up a copy and dive in. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What resonated with you? What questions are you left with? Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
Yeah, it's almost like she had to hit rock bottom in Maytan Fu, to really see things for what they were.
Right, totally. So where does she go from there? I mean, we haven't even touched on part 5, her return to England.
Well, part 5, it kind of brings us full circle. Kitty goes back to England, but she's different now. She reconnects with her father. He's a judge in the Bahamas now. And she sees him differently this time. It's interesting, right? After how her view of Walter changed. Do you think she's seeing those same qualities in her father? That strength, that integrity.
Oh, for sure. That's a great point. Before, it was all about her mother and those social ambitions. Do you think she's, like, reevaluating her whole family dynamic?
I think so, yeah. It's like she's finally seeing beyond the surface level stuff. But we can't forget, she's still got that secret. It's the whole question of her child's father. It adds this tension to her being back in England. She's got this new clarity, but her past is still there.
Yeah, that internal conflict, it must be a lot to carry. What do you think she sees for her future? For herself and her child? Does she fall back into those old societal expectations?
This is where things get really fascinating, I think. Kitty makes a conscious decision to break free from those societal constraints. You know, the ones that held her back before. She sees what happened with her mother, right? That whole focus on social status, finding the right husband. And she's like, nope, not for me.
Yeah, like she's finally taking control, not letting others define her life anymore, choosing her own path as a woman and as a mother.
Exactly. And choosing the Bahamas. That's a big statement. It's
Hmm.
like she's turning her back on London society.
Mm.
She wants a fresh start, a place to raise her child with those values she's discovered. Independence, strength, you know.
It's such a powerful message about self-determination. I mean, even after all she's been through, the loss, the heartbreak, she's creating this new future for herself and the next generation. What do you think about this ending? What stands out to you?
Well, I think there's this quiet sense of redemption. Even though Walter's gone and they never really made things right, Kitty's growth, her transformation, it becomes kind of a tribute to him, you know? She's living by the values he embodied,
Hmm.
compassion, integrity, service. It's bittersweet, of course. She finds peace. But there's that what if. What if she had understood Walter sooner?
Yeah, that bittersweetness, it really gets to you. It's like a reminder that growth often comes with a price. But it's never too late to change, to learn, and to create a new future for yourself. Makes you think about what Maugham was trying to say, right? Why take us on this journey with Kitty?
The Painted Veil.
Hmm.
It's a story that transcends time, I think. It speaks to these universal truths about being human. We've all been fooled by illusions. We've made bad choices, questioned who we are. Kitty's journey, it's not just about her. It's about all of us, our ability to grow, to change, to find ourselves.
It's a reminder that even when we screw up, when we experience loss, there's still that potential for something beautiful to come from it. It's a story about hope, resilience, the human spirit.
And that's what makes Maugham so great. He doesn't give us easy answers, tidy endings. He gives us questions, room to think about our own experiences and how they shape us into who we are.
Speaking of questions, there's one that's been sticking with me. We see Kitty transform, but do you think she ever truly forgives herself? Especially knowing Walter never got the chance to.
That's a really insightful question. And I think the novel leaves it open for us to decide. We see her regret, her trying to atone for what she did. But there's this sense that the guilt remains. It makes you wonder how that affects her as a mother, right? Does she overcompensate, try to shield her child from the same mistakes? Or does she accept that life is messy and teach her child to learn and grow from those inevitable stumbles?
Those are some deep questions, for sure. It's like Maugham is encouraging us to keep the story going, to wrestle with those unanswered questions, see how they play out in our own lives.
Absolutely. That's the power of great literature. It stays with you, makes you think differently, feel more deeply, maybe even live more intentionally.
Well said, well said. A huge thank you for joining me on this deep dive into The Painted Veil. It's been a pleasure unraveling this book with you.
The pleasure was all mine.
And to all of you listening, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity about The Painted Veil. If you haven't read it yet, we highly recommend you check it out. And as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What resonated with you? What questions are you left with? Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
Yeah, it's like he's giving us this open invitation to keep thinking about these themes, these characters, long after we've closed the book. This has been such a great conversation. I feel like I've got this whole new understanding of The Painted Veil.
That's what literature does, right? It sparks these conversations, these journeys that go way beyond the pages.
And it's not just about, like, the big life questions either. It's the little things, the way Mom uses language to
Yeah.
create these images, these emotions. There's this one part, it really stuck with me. Kitty describes the landscape around Fu as this painted veil, hiding the harsh reality beneath. Such a powerful metaphor, right? For the illusions we build for ourselves and the world around us. You know, that's a great point. Maugham's writing, it's simple on the surface, but it's full of meaning. He's so good at capturing those subtle emotions, those internal struggles we all face.
It makes me want to reread the book. Pay attention to those little details that might have slipped by before.
I think you should, yeah. Every time you read it, you discover something new, some hidden meaning you didn't see before.
I think that's a perfect place to wrap things up. A huge thank you for sharing your insights with us today. It's been a real pleasure exploring the Painted Veil with you.
It was my pleasure.
And everyone listening, we hope this deep dive has sparked your own curiosity about the Painted Veil. If you haven't read it yet, we highly recommend you check it out. And as always, we'd love to hear from you. What resonated with you? What questions did it bring up for you? Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.